Hi guys, Evan Jones here. Welcome to PT34 Game 3. We're glad to have you. This game is very hard. For a basic ordering game, it doesn't really get too much harder than this. Some of the questions are a real doozy. There's a hard question way early in the game. There's some questions where you have to look at each of the answer choices one by one. It's got all the elements that make a game tough. So if you're just starting out with this basic ordering course, and you happened on this game early on, I would recommend that maybe you go back and hit some of the others, because this is one of the 2 or 3 most difficult basic ordering games that the LSAT's ever thrown at you. You might want to put this one off and come back to it later after you've got a few more under your belt. As for the setup, there's nothing hard in the setup. We've just got 7 spots and 7 pieces going into them one to one. We know these trains are arriving one at a time, so that gives us a nice sense of order. One after the other, they're going to be consecutive. So the 7 spots form our board, and then the pieces we've listed up here, these trains, the Quigley, Rockville, Sunnydale, Tilbury, Victoria, Worcester, and York. So let's jump into those rules. We already covered that the trains arrive one at a time. Nothing's too tricky in these rules. It's more how they ask the questions that makes this game hard. So either York or Worcester arrives 4th, Y or W. That's just a standard option like we're very used to doing. And then the Sunnydale arrives sometime after the Worcester and sometime before the York. So again, nothing that we're not very used to seeing. Let me move that up here. And then the Tilbury and Victoria are sometime after the Rockville. Tilbury, Victoria, after the Rockville. So again, nothing too tricky there. T and V have to be after R. And then for our last rule, we get a not block where T and V cannot be next to each other. So if we see this TV, TV, if we see them in either order, it's going to be unacceptable. And for those of you who aren't used to the way I do things with this, that means that if we see a TV order, that's no good, and if we see a VT order, that's no good. I leave it this way because that's similar to how it might appear if you're left with only 2 spaces and you don't know which one goes where. Well, you drop it in like this, TV, TV, and you're still going to know that that violates the rules, right? Any order of those is no good. Whether it's VT or TV, it's no good. So you have to be careful. These two are both stuck behind R, and yet they can't be smushed together too closely. You've got to have some space in between them. And that's really the major theme of this game. That and figuring out whether this is W, S, Y, or Y, S, W. And that's going to kind of center around that 4 spot. These are the only 2 options available. In fact, I don't hate leaving that up there just to kind of give you a guide that you're going to see either this setup with the 4 as a Y or this one with the 4 as a W. Beyond that, there's no key inferences to make. I would just head on and get to the questions. 13 is our acceptability question. You just hit that like you would any other question that's an acceptability question. You take your rules one at a time and see where they're violated. So for example, we take this WSY rule and check that we see that in every order, and we see that it's not correctly ordered in B, so we gotta cross that off. Then we go to the next rule, repeat the process until we're left with one standing. Here it's C. Question 14 is about the hardest early question in a game that I've ever seen. So it's not like a world champion difficult problem, but for being this early in the game, it really is. So it can kind of hit you and throw you off your rhythm. So just be ready for the LSAT occasionally mixing things up that way. We get a local rule that Worcester arrives sometime before the Rockville. So that kind of links our 2 big chains here, and you got to redraw it. So Worcester, W, Y, and then you got to get a chain going up top that says now the Rockville is sometime after. And then TV, everything else still stands. So for me solving this question, my big thing was seeing, okay, now there's a ton of variables behind the Worcester. Is it going to be possible? I zeroed in on this 4 spot that's Y or W, And I was like, will W be possible there? Because there's so many things after it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's pretty obvious that you cannot now have the W in that 4 spot. That's going to become Y. Otherwise, you just don't have room for the RTVSY. So 4 becomes Y, and then now W and S are stuck out in front of that. I know that much. And then I look to the rest of this stuff that I haven't taken care of yet. I know R, T, and V have to go in here somewhere. W and S are taking up 2 of 3 of these front spots. If I try and put R after here, then T and V are going to end up squished together, and that's violating my no TV rule. Then T and V are going to end up squished together. We wouldn't know the order necessarily, but no matter what here, they're going to be next to each other, and that's no good. So that forces R out front as well. So the next inference, and this is a common theme, is that you don't know whether S or R is second or third, but you do know that W is forced to first, because both these guys have to be after it. And then in the back end, we have to keep V and T separate, so we pop them in there. And then Q, our only free variable, there's no rules about Q whatsoever, goes into the last spot. So how many combinations does this represent? Well, it's 4. There's 2 options, WSR, WRS, 2 options there, so 2 possibilities, and then VT or TV in the back for a total of 4 combinations. Incredibly difficult for the second question in the game, and we're left with A as the correct answer. Next, out of nowhere, we get an extremely easy question. But I think your rhythm's off after handling 14, so it's easy to waste a lot of time here. But this is a global question. And remember what I always say on global questions, especially when they're early in the game, take a first pass at the answer choices and look for something easy before you try to figure out anything hard. So what must be true? The first train arrives at Rockville. I'm not necessarily crossing it off, but I'm not going to give it a deep analysis yet until I've looked for something easy. Quigley sometime before Sunnydale? Again, I just don't want to think about it. I want to look for something that I know must be true that really jumps out at me. Rockville sometime before the Worcester? Looks unlikely. We can probably knock some of this stuff out with that scenario. Normally you wouldn't have erased the work we did in the last question. D, how about Victoria sometime before the York? Again, I'm just not going to take a hard look at it. I'm looking for something that jumps out at me. The Worcester arrives sometime before the Sunnydale. That's written right here in our rules. Yes, that must be true. The Worcester arrives sometime before the Sunnydale. So remember that technique on global must be true questions. Questions that apply that there's no added information. They're just asking about your main diagram, meaning they're global questions. Always try that technique with seeing if there's an easy answer, doing a first pass before then going into deeper analysis. The last thing you want to do on an early question is be hung up trying these things out one at a time, such as taking A and trying to put the Rockville not in 1 and then do a full order out to check if that is possible. And that way indirectly see if it must be true that R's in first. You don't want to be doing all that work unless it's absolutely necessary. Anyway, we're left with E as the answer choice, the correct answer on 15. 16 is asking for one that could be true. And in contrast to 15, with could be trues, it's a little less likely that you're going to see something that pops out right away at you. So I did a quick first pass to see if something was obvious that it could be true, but I didn't see anything. So then I'm looking at these one by one, and you got to just get in quickly and evaluate them. Could it be true that Sunnydale is the next train to arrive after the Quigley? So I try and put it in, right? Quigley, Sunnydale, Y. And then that forces T and V together in the back end. So that doesn't work. And the same thing is true whether I try it with the WSY or the YSW. W, Quigley, Sunnydale, Y. You're going to still end up with the R, TV, TV order that you cannot have. So A's gone. A lot of work to check these things, but that's just what you have to do to get this question right. What about Rockville being the next train to arrive after Sunnydale? So SR. Is that possible? I'm definitely going to check this one because it looks like that would be possible. So I try first with the W, S, R, Y order. So I'm working with this chain right here, this arrangement. And then can I get the T and V apart back here? Sure, no problem. T, V, and then Q goes in right here, and everything's fine. And clearly S and R can be one after another in that order, and that gives us the correct answer. B. 17 gives us a new local rule that W, S, Y form a block. Like this. They don't mention S specifically, but they say that one train is between the W and the Y, and the other rules remain in place, so that clearly has to be the S. So we're having to figure out what could be true in this situation. I thought the fastest way to handle this would just be to draw the two scenarios that are then possible with this WSY block. In each of them, you have to take care to separate out V and T. So we've seen this order before. V, T, Q is going to have to go there, R is going to have to go there. In this back one, V and T will have to be back here. Otherwise, there's no way to separate them. But this front portion is going to stay pretty open. We do know that Q, R, and one of VT lands in here. So now we've got that all figured out. We should be ready to go on to the questions. What could be true here? The 6th train to arrive is Sunnydale? No, we don't see that in either order. How about Tilbury is 6? Nope, again, not possible. Tilbury could be in 7th, but not 6. How about Rockville 3rd? It looks like it might be possible here, but then if you try and put R there, T or V is going to have to go before it, and that's violating this rule right here. So R in 3 is not possible. How about Sunnydale 2nd? Nope, that's not going to be possible in either of these, so it's gone, and we're left with E by elimination. The first train to arrive is Rockville. Yeah, sure, we saw that right there. 18 is a question with another new rule, which are usually a little trickier than when they actually tell us something about the order directly. As far as local questions go, this is the harder type. So we're told Quigley arrives before the Rockville. So now Quigley's no longer a free variable. We have VT, VT, and then we still have our same WS and Y rule. And then they're asking us when Worcester has to arrive. And we know it's either 4th or something other than 4th, right? On these questions where somebody must be in just one specific spot, you can just try something out. Then if it's acceptable, then it's clearly the right answer. So what I wanted to do is figure out if Worcester could be 4 first. It's worth noting that Worcester is always in 1, 2, or 4. So you're actually only trying A and B 2nd and 4th at all here. So I just arbitrarily tried 4 first. Worcester here, I put Q here, R here, 1 of VT here, we don't know which, and then Sunnydale, 1 of VT, and then Y. Things are a little flexible with how they flip around, but everything works out just totally fine here. So we know that it must be true that W is 4th, since that's what we see in this one acceptable order. If you tried instead to get Worcester into 4th and follow this SY rule, it looks pretty obvious that you're going to end up mushing together V and T again. VT, VT on the backside, and that's breaking this rule right here. So C is the correct answer. You could have gotten it by trying this one first or this one first. Okay, so that was a very hard game. If you got that with minimal problems, I would say you could consider yourself a master of basic ordering games. If it was hard for you, earmark it and come back to this game in a few weeks. Solving it should be easier after you've had experience with the correct setup, and that'll give you a familiarity with what it feels like to do well on a very difficult game. Okay, thanks for being with us. We'll see you on the next game. Bye.